Manic Panda again. This time I'm going to be doing a race creation tutorial for the Gene Hunter affinity. Basically, we're going to be trying to assimilate the galaxy. We're playing Pokemon in space, in other words. Gotta catch them all. Now, we're going to be obviously gameplay affinity Gene Hunters. For our visual affinity, we're going to be taking Cravers. You can play Cravers or Imperials, or you can play Unfallen as their visual affinity. Any of those three are extremely strong with the Gene Hunter. I prefer Cravers. They have the best early hero abilities, which are going to accelerate your growth. It's basically about ramping into your mid-game with Gene Hunter and trying to capture as many of the neutral factions as possible, just to buff your own population out the wazoo. For our home planet, we're going to take Jungle. It's the strongest high-end planet other than Forest. It's going to give us an all-round good start, with the exception of a little bit of lacking science, but we're going to make that up in the mid-game anyway, because we're playing Gene Hunters. For our government type, we take Federation. It's the most overpowered government type. It'll give us extra planets before we hit our overcolonization cap, so it's extremely strong because of that. Political leaning, we're going to lean towards the ecologists. It's the strongest political leaning by far. It basically guarantees that we don't have any bumps in our early game, because we're able to pick and choose where we want to colonize, and just negates any negative impact that having bad planets or hard to colonize planets in the early game causes to your race. To support them, we're taking a standard Utopian. You do a lot of industry buildings in the early game and events that support industry, so we're going to make sure that those support our ecological leaning to make sure that we keep our ecologists in power for as long as possible. In the mid to late game, we're going to try and look to transfer that into having scientists in power, so we don't want to take anything that is negative to our actual science leaning or anything like that. Now, I haven't taken a third because we're already pretty tight for points on our population. We want to make sure that we get a good, strong actual population bonus, because while we're going to increase that later, if we hurt our early game too much, then we're going to have issues later on. For our population bonus that we start with, we're going to be taking Mediocratic Cosmopolites. It's an all-round strong quality to take, +2 to every single per population, and once we get going, that's going to be extremely big because we're going to have such a large population. We're focusing on growth and that sort of thing with this race, because obviously our population is going to consume more food. We need to make sure that we support that a little bit. Making sure we have an extremely strong start, we take the Bounteous Gardeners. It gives us extra food on fertile. Jungle is guaranteed to be a fertile planet, so that means that we know on our home planet we're going to be getting at least +10 at the beginning from our food because of our 2-base population. Right, and we're going to cap that out, and it just gives you an extremely strong base to grow from. For our end bonus for our population, we're going to be taking Peer Review Collection. It gives us an extremely strong boost to our science, which is the one thing that we're sort of lacking in the early game. So when we hit that 20 population, it's going to make up for that deficit a little bit, and that technology cost when we hit our 50 is going to let us catch up to anyone that's gotten ahead of us and bypass them by far. The only people that will generally give you a run for your money in that science can be Cravers or Sophons, especially the Cravers if they have just been let go. If they spawn in the galaxy in a star constellation by themselves, generally, it can be the only race that really keeps up with you outside of Sophons, purely because of their science focus as well. Now, for our race, we're going to be taking the basic negatives. Amateur executives, level up our trade company slower. It's not something that we're really going to be focusing on. Our focus is going to be a little more growth plan and combat orientated, because we want to conquer a lot of the different races and basically assimilate them. So you've got a couple of different options to what I've taken. These ones here are my personal preferences. Combat rookies we're not going to take because they're going to be befriending or basically growing rapidly, so our manpower reserves aren't going to be an issue. It's not so much about your actual cap or anything like that, it's how much you make a turn. If you make enough a turn, any penalties to what the extra cost is completely negated. We're going to take crowded planets to give us that little bit of extra quality on all of our systems. It just makes them that much stronger, especially if you get a lot of gas giant systems around you, that sort of thing. They go from 1 to 2, that's doubling their population. Now, we're going to take Apistis citizens as our starting minor faction. A lot of my custom races I don't take minor factions. This one we're going to start with one because we're playing Gene Hunters. We want to assimilate something with really good quality early on. Now, Apistis are exceptionally good for this because we want to grow rapidly, right? When you assimilate these guys, it doesn't show you in the game just yet what the starting population would give you if you assimilated them, which I hope Amplitude does see, maybe this video or something like that, or someone else brings it up and they add that in later when you have the Gene Hunter gameplay activated, right? These guys give us +5 food on sterile, which, okay, not really that big of a deal because we're starting on a fertile planet, and +1 production. But when we assimilate them, they give us +3 food flat per population and +1 industry. So it lets us ramp early game extremely strong. Some of the other really good ones that you might take are Nereus, really strong for food. Doivians, really strong. Assimilating them gives you a good quality. And there is the Pulsos, I believe it is. Yeah, the Pulsos are basically the Apistis, but they give 3 science instead. So they're really strong starting ones. If you want to play more of a science focus Gene Hunter, take your Pulsos. They're a little bit cheaper, so you can spend the extra 5 points on something else. But in my opinion, Apistis is pretty much the strongest out of the options. Now, we're going to take Expansionist. We're going to be looking to rapid expand and colonize as many systems as quickly as possible and then conquer via either diplomatic with our neutrals or by force. The more planets you have, the more ability you have to produce stuff, the stronger you're going to be throughout the entire game. So playing a race that rapidly expands, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Now, we're going to run Growth Plan. This allows us to grow our populations quicker, assimilate them quicker. Anything to do with buffing your food as Gene Hunters is pretty much a good thing because it'll allow you to ramp out. So, in our mid-game, we can do sort of little tricks that help Gene Hunters. Like, if we conquer a sector, right, we can take population and split them up to different systems, right? So you might start with 4 population, and you might need 10 or 12 or 14 even, because you're getting towards the late game, to actually assimilate their genetic information into the gene pool. You can take those 4, leave 1 on that system, and send 3 to nearby systems to accelerate your growth. Because of the way population works in this game, each population takes turns at growing dependent on their growth rate. Right, so if you have a system with 3 population, it needs to gain 3 population before you are guaranteed to grow 1 population of that type. With the exception of Riftborn, but that's a whole different thing. So basically you want to try and grow populations as quick as possible because it's going to be alternating 1, 1, 1, 1. When you have just your base race and another race there, you need to get, 5, 7, whatever your odd numbers are, depending on which cycle it starts on. So growing population is extremely important to Gene Hunters, and obviously it offsets the fact that later on we're going to be consuming a lot more food because we've spliced in a lot of different genetic sequences. Now, again, it's one of the basic negatives that we can take. We can take inept traders. We're not going to be focusing on trade too much. It's a possible win con for us because we're such a rapidly expanding race. So you can trade it out if you want. There are other negatives that work in there. You could take the Eternal War instead and go for a full conquering. It gives you a completely different gameplay, but it's the exact same points sort of thing. So you've got a couple of options there, and we take strange but good just to shore up our start, make sure that we have a good start and we can transition well into our mid game. I hope you guys have enjoyed the tutorial. I'll be putting up a little bit of gameplay from the race in the next couple of days, that sort of thing, so you guys can actually watch it work. I didn't get to do it with the last lot of race creation tutorials because the day they did it, they dropped the patch that changed all of the races so that we had a 8 trait maximum. So, really strong patch. Helped the game a lot because we could make overpowered races. Like, you could take so many different negatives that didn't matter to your race and take a whole bunch of positives that just accentuated all of the bonuses. So keep an eye out for that if you guys have any curiosities. I'll be putting a lot more tips on how to actually play the race and small little things that you can do with the race while playing to basically increase your gameplay across the board. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Make sure you hit the like button if you've enjoyed the video and subscribe if you want to see more content.